Okay, so this is kind of where we left off. We're going to talk about the Forum of Augustus, which was Augustus's most ambitious building project. And it was basically this new forum, and the forum is the center of Roman public life. So ultimately, the new Forum of Augustus is in ruins today, but we will talk about it a bit because it was definitely a very impressive project that he did. And it was made from marble from a new quarry that was opened up in Italy. And with this newly available source of marble, he was able to use marble to transform the city of Rome from a mud brick city into a city of marble, much like Athens under Pericles was built of marble. So once again, Augustus is really trying to emulate the Greeks and Athens under Pericles specifically, by transforming the city of Rome into a marble city instead of mud brick. And another way he emulated Athens was in his new forums. He had copies of the caryatid columns that were on the Erechtheion in the Athenian Acropolis. So he did copies of those columns, which are lady columns, basically lady statuettes that make up the columns that were on the Erechtheion in the Athenian Acropolis. He made copies of those and put those in his new forum. And those went on the upper story of the porticos. And the forum also contained many portraits of Augustus's forebearers. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the forum because it's in ruins, but I did want to talk about it because the book does mention it. So we'll move on to Maison Carey, looking northwest, names, France, 1 to 10 CE. So many historians believe that the same stonemasons that built the Forum of Augustus also built this pseudo-dipterial temple in France. And it's called the Maison Carey, and it's in Nimes, France, which is a Gallic territory that Rome had captured. And it's well preserved, and you can see that it has Corinthian capitals on its columns. And it does have the engaged columns on the side, and it is seated on a high platform with one staircase leading to the entrance at the front of the temple, which is a very Roman design. So these are all in the, all perfectly in the round, these front columns, and then they're engaged on the side with the Corinthian capital, which is definitely extra frilly and decorative. And then, you know, the Etruscan influence can be seen with the one entrance here and the high platform. So, but it's French in nature, definitely. So let's take another look at some other pieces here. Point de Garde, looking east in Nimes, France, 16 BCE. So this is another Augustan project that was built by Augustus, and it's called the Point de Garde, and it's basically just an aqueduct bridge. And in the 4th century BCE, the Romans began building these aqueducts to carry water from mountain sources into their cities. And the engineers constructed these aqueducts to serve the colonies throughout the large Roman Empire. And this one provided 100 gallons of water each day to each inhabitant of Nimes. So that's quite a bit of water. And the water came from 30 miles away. And the water flowed over this distance by gravity alone. So it carried water over the river while maintaining the height needed to get the water to the rest of the way to its destination. And each large arc spans around 82 feet, and some of the blocks weigh as much as 2 tons each. So this is a really large, structure. And the uppermost level is a row of smaller arches, and that's what carries the water channel. And there's a lot of harmony between the larger and smaller arches. And so you can kind of see that the engineers built this with aesthetics in mind too. I mean, they wanted it to make it look nice as well as, function properly. But you can see, this repetition of almost this arch shape is almost like a pattern, and it creates a lot of harmony in the overall look of the structure. So this is the east facade of the Porta Maggiore, Rome, Italy, 50 CE. And it was built by the Emperor Claudius, and it's basically a grand gate called the Porta Maggiore, and it's the point where 2 of Rome's water lines converge, and it's in the uppermost story or attic. it does bear this inscription that also conceals the stacked water channels of. So there's some water channels up here, two different ones that converge at this point. And there's a mixture of precisely shaped blocks and Roman rusticated or rough masonry on this gate. So both smooth and rustic surfaces are included, which is kind of an eccentric style. And then it has this crisply carved or dressed masonry pediments and roughed engaged columns. So you can see these columns, how rough they are. The stone looks not very well finely dressed in some areas. And then in other areas, it's very smooth and finely dressed. So it's kind of a mixture of really finely dressed with the rougher look, which Roman art is just very eclectic. So it's going to have a mixture of different things. And that's one thing that you'll notice about Roman art is it doesn't really follow a lot of rules. It has a lot of different influences, but it doesn't follow a lot of rules like the Greeks did, per se. So, okay, keep going here. Okay, so Nero's Golden House, we'll talk about that a little bit. Nero was an emperor of the Roman Empire, and in 64 CE, that's kind of the time that he was around. And during this time, a great fire actually ravaged the city of Rome. And after the fire, Nero came up with some new building codes that required greater fireproofing for structures. And so they used concrete more, which was a relatively new building material at this time. And another result of the fire was that Nero was able to confiscate a really large tract of land from the fire-ravaged areas of Rome near the Forum Romanum. And he actually built a huge mansion on this piece of confiscated land. And Severus and Celer were the architect/engineers that built this giant and very luxurious home. And it was huge, and it had many rooms adorned with frescoes. So we'll take a look at some frescoes. So most of the house was made with concrete, but the most impressive feature it had was an octagonal hall, and it really stands apart and is a testimony to Severus and Celer's innovative approach to architectural design. So here's the, octagonal hall here, and it's an octagonal room with a dome ceiling, and it has an oculus at the apex to let in light. You can see the oculus here. And radiating outward from some of the dome's sides were these smaller rectangular rooms, which you can see here, kind of radiating out of the sides of it here. And these rooms were covered by barrel vaults, and the two other rooms marked by X's here are covered by the earliest known concrete groin vaults. Severus and Celer lit these satellite rooms by leaving space between their vaulted ceilings and the external dome's exterior. But the most important thing about this design is that it shows the architect's thought of the walls and vaults not as limiting the space, but as shaping it, which is a new thing in architecture at this time, mostly possible due to concrete and the shapes that concrete made possible. Let's see how much time we have. Okay, we're still doing pretty good. So here's the Octagonal Hall, room 85 of the Domus of Nero, Rome, Italy, 64 through 68. So this is the top of what it looks like now. And, you know, it's not that impressive when you look at it like this. You know, that does not have stucco on it. But you can see the structure of the building really well on the top there. On this top picture. So the architects were progressive because they recognized the flexible nature of concrete, and the material was not limited to rectilinear forms. They were actually able to bring in the dome shape, and you know, this is the restored view of what they think it looked like. Much fancier. It had marble facing, you know, these are marble pieces that were added, and stucco to dress the walls, and then on top of that would be fresco painting. Okay, so we'll move on. So the Flavians, they were, it's a name, the Flavians. So the Senate grew tired of Nero's spending and abuses of power, and they eventually declared Nero an enemy of the state. And he fled Rome and shortly after committed suicide, and he was 30 years old. And after Nero's death, a year of conflict ensued, and a winner was actually declared. Vespasian, who was a general who had served under Claudius and Nero, and Vespasian's family name was Flavius, and he had two sons that both ended up ruling Rome after his death. In fact, the Flavians actually ruled Rome for more than 25 years. So the Flavians are responsible for one of the most famous pieces of architecture ever constructed on the face of the planet, which is the Colosseum, the Roman Colosseum. And this is a Roman, an aerial view of the Roman Colosseum, which is actually called the Flavian Amphitheater. At least in its day, it was called that. And it was one of Vespasian's first undertakings when he became emperor. Engineers actually drained the artificial lake from Nero's huge house, and Vespasian essentially reclaimed the land for the public in order to build the largest arena for gladiatorial combat that was ever constructed. And they could hold this Colosseum could hold more than 50,000 spectators. But it doesn't get its name from its size. It gets its name from its location beside the Colossus of Nero, the 120-foot tall statue at the entrance of his great house. So it actually got it from Nero's huge house and not necessarily because it's such a huge arena. So this is definitely, the Colosseum is, a famous place. The gladiatorial battles, the wild animal hunts were just the kind of spectacle that took place within the walls of the Colosseum. They were very popular with the Roman public. Basically, Vespasian, when he built this, he's just trying to gain public favor, right? Like, if he puts on all these games and lets the people come watch, they're going to love him, right? So that's why he did it. And gladiators were professional fighters, usually slaves who had been purchased, and then they were trained in gladiatorial schools. And some gladiators were able to have long careers and achieve considerable fame. And some people were simply put into the arena with no training and no defensive weapons. And they were actually killed just for, fun, I guess. Which was kind of a form of capital punishment paired with the entertainment of the masses, basically. So wild animals were oftentimes set loose in the arena with helpless prisoners who were easy prey for hungry beasts. And, sometimes archers would shoot the animals. And sometimes different animals would be pitted against each other, like bears versus bull, lion versus elephant, just for the crowd to watch. Really quite a form of quite violent entertainment and also quite cruel. But if you think about it, the shows we watch today are just as violent, but they're just CG, computer-generated images, so nothing is actually being hurt anymore. Whereas back then, it was actual violence, so... But luckily, the violence we watch, like I said, on TV today is all fake, typically, so no one actually gets hurt. But back then, it was real, so... well, maybe we'll look at the north facade of the Colosseum or the Flavian Amphitheater. So this is probably one of the shots you've seen of it before, kind of a famous view of it. So in the year 80, the Colosseum was completed, and it could not have been built without the use of concrete. So there's a complex system of barrel-vaulted corridors that led to the enormous oval seating area. So the skeleton is exposed today because after the fall of Rome, the Colosseum was regularly stripped of its stone after the fall of Rome. So we're really just seeing the skeleton of the building here. And the Colosseum did have a velarium, which is a large cloth that covered and shielded the spectators from the sun and rain. And it's 16 stories high, and in antiquity it had 76 numbered gateways that provided efficient entrance and exit paths, much like the arenas we have today. And the facade is divided into 4 bands, one with large arched opening. Ornamental Greek orders frame the arches, and the ground level band is done in the style called Tuscan, then Ionic, then Corinthian, and at the 3rd and even 4th level,